My two sisters lost their court case yesterday and must pay me £15,000 plus legal costs within 30 days or face asset seizure and wage garnishment. The judge ruled that their refusal to honor our father's promise was unconscionable and ordered them to split the payment from their own savings and retirement funds. They are now facing financial hardship and family disgrace because they chose greed over fairness. 6 months after our father's death, my sisters Sarah and Emma thought they could steal my inheritance by claiming that promises to dead people do not count in estate law. Today they learned that fairness and family honor matter more than technicalities, and their selfishness has cost them more than they tried to save. Our father had promised each of his children the same amount of money to help with car purchases and driving lessons. Sarah got hers at 17. Emma got hers at 27 when she finally decided to learn to drive. But I never received mine because Dad died before I started my driving lessons at 30. My sisters claimed that was just bad luck and refused to share the estate fairly. The two women who spent months telling me that I had no legal right to money I was never technically owed are now being forced to pay me from their own pockets while facing the permanent consequences of their greed and cruelty. The family unity they claimed to value was destroyed by their unwillingness to honor our father's intentions and treat me with basic fairness. The story of how I turned my sister's greed into a legal nightmare that cost them their financial security and family relationships started the day after our father's funeral when they showed their true colors. The story of how this complete destruction of my sister's financial security and family standing happened started 30 years ago, when our father established a tradition of helping each of his children with driving lessons and car purchases when they decided to learn to drive. This was not just a casual gift, but a deliberate family policy designed to ensure that all 3 of his children received equal support for this important milestone. Our father was a fair and thoughtful man who believed strongly in treating his children equally regardless of when they reached different life stages. He understood that people learned to drive at different ages for various reasons, and wanted to make sure that timing did not affect the level of support each child received from him. When my older sister Sarah turned 17, she received the full driving lesson package plus money for a car purchase. This was a significant amount that covered professional lessons, theory test fees, practical test fees, and a substantial contribution toward buying her first vehicle. The total value was approximately £5,000, which was a meaningful amount for our family at that time. I was only 12 when Sarah learned to drive, and our father specifically told me that I would receive the same support when I decided to learn to drive, regardless of when that happened. He said that fairness meant each child getting the same opportunities, not necessarily at the same age. He wanted me to know that his support was guaranteed whenever I was ready. When I turned 17, our family was experiencing financial difficulties due to my father's business struggles. He explained that he could not afford to pay for my driving lessons at that time, but promised that the money would be available when our financial situation improved. He assured me that he had not forgotten his commitment and that I would definitely receive the same support my sister had gotten. But this was only the beginning of a pattern of delayed promises that would span over a decade. Throughout my 20s, I moved abroad for university and work opportunities that made driving unnecessary. I lived in cities with excellent public transportation and had no immediate need for a car or driving license. My father regularly reminded me that his offer of support remained open whenever I decided to learn to drive. When I returned to the UK in my late 20s and settled in a smaller city where driving would be useful, I began planning to finally take advantage of my father's standing offer. By this time, my younger sister Emma had also received her driving lesson support at age 27 when she decided it was time to learn. Our father had honored his commitment to her despite the significant age gap and timing differences. The consistency of his support for both my sisters reinforced my understanding that this was a genuine family tradition and not a casual offer that could be withdrawn or forgotten. Our father had demonstrated over many years that he was committed to providing equal support to all 3 of his children for this particular milestone. I didn't know yet that my father's sudden death would give my sisters the opportunity to reveal their true character and their willingness to steal from family. When our father died unexpectedly from a heart attack, I had been planning to start driving lessons within the next few months. I had researched driving instructors, budgeted for the costs, and was looking forward to finally taking advantage of the support he had promised me for so many years. His death came just weeks before I had planned to begin the process. At the funeral and in the immediate aftermath, my sisters expressed sympathy about the unfortunate timing of our father's death and acknowledged that it was sad that I had missed out on something he had clearly intended for me to receive. They seemed to understand that the timing was purely coincidental and that our father's intentions had been clear. During the initial estate discussions, I mentioned that I hoped we could find a way to honor our father's intention to provide equal support to all 3 children. I suggested that the estate could cover the driving lesson costs that he had promised me, just as he had provided for both of them during his lifetime. My sisters initially seemed receptive to this idea and agreed that our father would have wanted all 3 children to receive equal treatment. They acknowledged that he had specifically promised me the same support and that his death had prevented him from fulfilling that promise through no fault of mine. The next discovery made me realize that my sisters were not the fair and loving people I had believed them to be. Over the following weeks, my sisters' attitudes began to change as they consulted with lawyers and financial advisors about the estate distribution. They learned that there was no legal requirement to honor promises that had not been formalized in the will, and they began to see my request as a threat to their own inheritance, rather than a matter of basic fairness. Sarah, who had received her support 15 years earlier, began arguing that too much time had passed and that I had essentially forfeited my right to the money. by waiting so long to learn to drive. She claimed that the offer had been conditional on reasonable timing, and that waiting until 30 was unreasonable. Emma, who had received her support just 3 years earlier at age 27, began arguing that the money should stay in the estate because our father had never actually spent it on. She claimed that promises made to living people died with them, and that I had no moral or legal claim to money that had never been formally allocated. Both sisters began pressuring me to accept that the timing was unfortunate, but that life is not always fair, and that I needed to move on without expecting compensation for missed opportunities. They said that demanding money from the estate was selfish, and that I should be grateful for what I was already receiving rather than trying to get more. That's when I knew exactly what I had to do to teach them that greed and unfairness have consequences. I spent 3 months carefully planning exactly how I would use the legal system to force my sisters to honor our father's intentions and face serious consequences for their greed and unfairness. I knew that simply arguing about moral obligations would not be enough because they had already shown that they prioritized money over family relationships and basic decency. My first step was documenting everything about our father's promises and the pattern of support he had provided to both of my sisters. I gathered evidence of his consistent statements about providing equal support to all 3 children, witnessed testimony from family members who had heard his promises, and financial records showing the amounts he had spent on my sister's driving education. I also researched legal precedents related to promissory estoppel and family obligations to see if there were grounds for forcing the estate to honor promises made during the deceased's lifetime. I discovered that courts sometimes enforce promises when there is clear evidence of intent and when the promisee has reasonably relied on those promises. Additionally, I began building a case that my sister's refusal to honor our father's intentions was not just legally questionable, but morally reprehensible and damaging to family relationships. I wanted to show that their greed was destroying the family unity our father had valued and had worked to maintain throughout his life. What I discovered next changed everything about how I planned to handle their selfishness and greed. I learned that my sisters had been discussing their strategy for denying my claim with other family members and had been trying to build support for their position. They had been portraying me as greedy and unreasonable while presenting themselves as victims of my unrealistic demands. However, the extended family's reaction was not what my sisters had expected. Our aunts, uncles, and cousins were shocked by their refusal to honor our father's clear intentions and their willingness to prioritize money over family fairness. Many family members had witnessed our father's promises to me over the years and were disgusted by my sister's greed. Most importantly, I discovered that our father had actually set aside money specifically for my driving lessons in a separate savings account that my sisters were aware of but had chosen not to mention during estate discussions. They had deliberately hidden this evidence of his intentions in order to keep more money for themselves. I realized that this was not just about family unfairness, but about deliberate deception and theft. My sisters had actively concealed evidence of our father's intentions and had lied to me about the estate's contents in order to steal money that was rightfully mine. My plan had 3 phases designed to maximize both legal victory and social consequences for their dishonesty and greed. Phase 1 was building an ironclad legal case with overwhelming evidence of our father's intentions and my sister's deception. I hired a specialist estate lawyer who had experience with promissory estoppel cases and family inheritance disputes. The lawyer was confident that we could demonstrate clear evidence of intent and reasonable reliance. We gathered witness statements from dozens of family members who could testify about our father's promises and his consistent support for my sister's driving education. We documented the pattern of equal treatment he had provided and his specific statements about ensuring that all 3 children received the same opportunities. The legal team also investigated the hidden savings account and discovered that our father had been regularly contributing money specifically designated for my future driving lessons. The account had clear documentation showing that the funds were intended for my education, making my sister's denial of the claim both legally and morally indefensible. His reaction when he realized what I had done was priceless and exactly what I had hoped for. Phase 2 was exposing their deception and greed to the extended family and ensuring that they faced social consequences for their dishonesty. I created a detailed timeline that showed our father's consistent promises, the evidence of his intentions, and my sister's deliberate concealment of relevant information. I shared this information with every family member who had been told their version of events. I provided evidence of our father's savings account, witness statements about his promises, and documentation of their attempts to hide relevant information from me during estate discussions. The response from the extended family was immediate and devastating for my sister's reputation and relationships. Our aunts and uncles were horrified to learn that they had been lying about the estate contents and had been trying to steal money that our father had specifically set aside for me. Our cousins were disgusted by their greed and their willingness to destroy family relationships over money that they had no right to claim. Many family members had respected our father's fairness and commitment to equal treatment and were appalled that his own daughters would betray those values so quickly after his death. But I wasn't finished. The next phase guaranteed that their financial and social consequences would be permanent and severe. Phase 3 was pursuing the most aggressive legal action possible to ensure that they paid not just the money they owed me, but also substantial penalties for their deception and bad faith behavior. The lawyer recommended seeking not just the original amount, but also interest, legal costs, and punitive damages for their deliberate concealment of evidence. The legal strategy was designed to hit them where it would hurt most, their financial security and their reputation for honesty and integrity. We would show that their behavior was not just unfair, but deliberately deceptive and designed to defraud me of money that was rightfully mine. The lawsuit also included claims for intentional infliction of emotional distress and breach of fiduciary duty as executors of the estate. We argued that their deliberate concealment of the savings account and their lies about our father's intentions had caused me significant emotional harm and had violated their legal obligations as estate administrator. The consequences were immediate and devastating for every aspect of my sisters' lives and relationships. The legal case was a complete disaster for them from the beginning. The evidence of our father's intentions was overwhelming, and the hidden savings account proved that they had been deliberately deceptive about the estate's contents. Their lawyers struggled to present any credible defense for their behavior. My sisters were forced to testify about their knowledge of the savings account and their reasons for concealing it from me during estate discussions. Their own words revealed the calculating nature of their deception and their prioritization of money over family relationships and basic honesty. The judge was clearly disgusted by their behavior and their attempts to steal money from their own family member. The evidence of their father's intentions was so clear, and their deception so obvious, that the court had no difficulty ruling in my favor on all claims. The financial judgment was severe, and included not just the original amount I was owed, but also substantial penalties for their bad faith behavior. They were ordered to pay legal costs, interest, and punitive damages that significantly exceeded the amount they had tried to steal from me. The extended family completely turned against them once the truth about their deception became public. Family members who had initially been neutral became active supporters of my case and condemned my sisters for their dishonesty and greed. And then their whole world completely collapsed when the full extent of their deception became public knowledge. The trial revealed shocking details about their systematic deception and their willingness to lie to family members in order to steal money that was not theirs. Internal communications showed them discussing strategies for hiding the savings account and for convincing family members that my claim was unreasonable. The evidence showed that they had been planning to divide the hidden money between themselves while maintaining that it did not exist. They had been prepared to lie under oath and to destroy family relationships in order to profit from their deception. The community of family and friends was outraged by the revelation that people they had trusted and respected were actually calculating thieves who had stolen from their own family member during a time of grief. The betrayal was so extreme that it shocked even people who knew about the inheritance dispute. Extended family members who had previously maintained relationships with both sides now refused to associate with my sisters or include them in family gatherings. Their reputation for honesty and integrity was permanently destroyed by their greed and deception. The financial consequences also extended beyond the legal judgment. Both sisters had to liquidate savings accounts and retirement funds to pay the court-ordered damages. Sarah had to take out a loan against her house to cover her portion of the payment, while Emma had to withdraw money from her pension fund and face early withdrawal penalties. Their credit ratings were affected by the financial strain, and they faced ongoing difficulties meeting their other financial obligations while paying the judgment and legal costs. The money they had tried to steal ended up costing them significantly more than they would have lost by simply honoring our father's intentions. The social and emotional consequences were equally severe. Both sisters lost relationships with extended family members who were disgusted by their behavior. Their own children began questioning their integrity and asking difficult questions about why they had lied and stolen from their own family. The stress of the legal case and social ostracism also affected their marriages and friendships. Their spouses struggled to defend their behavior to other family members and community members who knew about the case. Some relationships ended permanently, as people chose not to associate with proven liars and thieves. 1 year after winning the legal battle that forced my sisters to honor our father's intentions and face the consequences of their greed and deception, I have found peace in knowing that justice was served and that his values of fairness and equal treatment were ultimately upheld. The money I received allowed me to complete my driving education exactly as he had intended, and I think of him every time I drive. My relationship with my sisters has never recovered and likely never will. They showed their true character when they thought they could get away with stealing from me, and that revelation cannot be undone. I have learned that some people will choose money over family relationships when they think they can avoid consequences for their greed. The extended family has been incredibly supportive throughout this process and has made it clear that they value honesty and fairness over maintaining comfortable relationships with dishonest people. My aunts, uncles, and cousins continue to include me in family gatherings while excluding my sisters, proving that actions have lasting consequences. I have used the settlement money exactly as our father intended, completing professional driving lessons and purchasing a reliable vehicle. Every time I drive, I remember his commitment to treating his children fairly and his belief that promises should be kept, even when it becomes inconvenient or costly to honor them. The consequences for my sisters have been swift and lasting. Sarah and Emma have both faced ongoing financial difficulties as a result of the judgment and legal costs. They have had to make significant lifestyle changes and have struggled to rebuild their savings and retirement funds. Their reputations in the family and community have never recovered from the revelation of their deception and theft. People who once respected them as honest and trustworthy now see them as greedy and dishonest individuals who cannot be trusted with money or family responsibilities. The stress of the legal case and social ostracism has also affected their personal relationships and mental health. Both sisters have reportedly struggled with depression and anxiety related to the loss of family relationships and community standing. Most importantly, their own children have learned valuable lessons about the importance of honesty and fairness from watching their mothers face consequences for their dishonest behavior. Several nieces and nephews have reached out to maintain relationships with me while distancing themselves from their mother's actions. The case has also established important legal precedent about family obligations and the enforcement of promises made during a person's lifetime. Our father's intentions were honored despite the lack of formal documentation, proving that courts will sometimes enforce moral obligations when the evidence of intent is clear. The hidden savings account that my sisters tried to conceal became the key evidence that proved our father's intentions and exposed their deception. Their attempt to steal money that was specifically designated for me became the evidence that guaranteed their defeat and punishment. The most important lesson I learned from this experience is that family relationships require mutual respect and basic honesty to survive. When family members choose greed over fairness and deception over honesty, they forfeit their right to be trusted and included in family bonds. If you are dealing with family members who are trying to cheat you out of inheritance or promise support, document everything and consider legal action to protect your rights. Sometimes the only way to enforce fairness is through the court system, especially when family members have shown they cannot be trusted to do the right thing voluntarily. What would you have done in my situation? Have you ever had to fight family members who tried to steal from you or break promises made by deceased relatives? Share your experiences with inheritance disputes and family greed in the comments below. How do you handle relatives who prioritize money over family relationships? If you know someone who is dealing with unfair treatment in inheritance or estate matters, please encourage them to seek legal advice and documentation. Many people assume that family promises die with the person who made them, but courts sometimes enforce those promises when the evidence of intent is clear. Like this video, if you believe that family members who steal from each other deserve to face serious consequences for their greed. Subscribe for more stories about people who fought back against dishonest relatives and won justice through the legal system. Have you ever had to choose between keeping family peace and fighting for what was rightfully yours? Remember that honesty and fairness are the foundation of healthy family relationships, and people who violate those principles should face consequences regardless of their biological connection to you. Sometimes protecting yourself from dishonest family members is the most important thing you can do for your own well-being and future security.